Why does that person think that way? Um, there's really something that I've realized in dealing with libertarianism, um, the conservatives. With conservatives, the standard traditional conservative is usually a Catholic or a Protestant. They attend church or they venerate the tradition of their church or synagogue or something like that. These people will typically fairly use language. If they do not use a term correctly, they will try to find a term that's easy to agree upon. Um, Typically, these people tend to have their vocabulary is very good. In my personal experience in discussing a subject, if there is an area of phenomenal knowledge or an area of conceptual disagreement, there's something about maybe Trinitarianism or something that you really have to agree on this idea to then take it to another part of the conversation. Theology is one of these where it's like, okay, for the most part, the way the culture is developed, you being, say, a Unitarian Christian or a Jew, where God is Unitarian, the Messiah has not come. For the Christian, say a Catholic or an Orthodox, or a Trinitarian Protestant, like a Christian brother. Um, if you disagree on this theological concept, it could mean a lot of things for, say, your eschatology, the way the world will end. It could mean a lot of things for stuff having to do with, like, the unseen world. That the Paraclete is a term from Greek for the Holy Spirit, this intercessor. Um, Sometimes language. There's a version of the way the Syriac translates a number of ways that Christ talks about himself, as he says, I am the manifestation. While there's this thing, I am the truth, this person is like, okay, no. This is not the word truth in Greek. This is not what you're seeing in Aramaic, in Syriac, in Aramaic, in Syriac Aramaic. That is not he would have been using a different word for this. The way the feeling of the word, the only way we could discuss this is it would be manifestation. Well, I had a discussion with somebody who it took me a while to figure out that I'm like, a lot of our conversations have to do with this person just breaking into sophistry for extremely long amounts of time. Another part of it was discussing really fundamentally his disagreements with his ex-wife, which to some extent I could solidly be like, oh man, they're okay, I get, but at some point there'd be a point at which I'm like, you are not seeking advice here. You are just talking about your endless amount of odd decisions having to do with this woman. So at a certain stage, I really did almost everything I could to avoid any conversation along those lines. I didn't want to talk about. I have no idea. The children, I don't know if they're from a previous marriage. I finally was like, no, I don't want to know if they're actually your kids. I got this feeling that you actually, they came with the marriage, is the idea I'm kind of getting, but I have no idea. And it literally was. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm not even going to ask about this phenomenon because I don't want to go. This is a realm of knowledge. I really have no actual interest, and this is something we were talking about, words today. And I had to finally break it down to this person that I'm like, what I think you're discussing is what's called sophistry. And that while you're desperately discussing why somebody would use one word, another person would use another. And I was like, there are definitive terms for everything that you're bringing up. This is actually been covered in the most fundamental understand. And then it hit me. I'm like, somehow you are a very smart white person who accomplishes a lot of things that are difficult, but the trivium is lost on you. You get waved around like a toy by women. They play with you like a bauble. And I started sitting there like, oh no. Like, and he's talking about what basically getting into somebody's head, talking about something and getting into their head. And I'm sitting there, and the way he's putting the words together, I was like, wait a second, no, nigga, I know what you're talking about. You're trying to read people's minds and shit by saying a bunch of bullshit. You're rapping. This is called rapping. Bullshitting. It's rapping. When you don't say bullshitting, when you don't want to say, oh, me and homie were over there bullshitting, you say, oh, I was just rapping to this cat. This is like an old term in Black Americana. I was rapping with this cat. This goes back to the old jazz days. Rapping, that's what it came from. What it really comes from, if everybody wants to understand where rap came from, where you got to look up a guy named Rudy Ray Moore, Dolomite. And there's some also famous Puerto Rican junkie poet, not even kidding, famous junkie poet, that it is a lot of sort of he gets associated with rap. I want to say Basquiat or Bastiat or something like that, but that's not correct. That was a contemporary junkie painter or something from like France or something. But this term rapping, I was just rapping with some dude. I was rapping with this pimp. And that's really what it came from. Pimps and their pimp language. Gangsters and heroin dealers from like the jazz days. Heroin was real big. My teacher used to talk about in the 50s, you could scarcely find marijuana. But you could find skag everywhere. So as I grew up in San Francisco, it took me a while as a kid to understand when people were just kind of, you had no idea what the fuck they were talking about. But they just decided to start rapping at you on the bus. Because I was a kid, there was only so much people will watch themselves. They don't want anybody thinking you're messing with some kid or something. But I got used to this idea that there's people who will just bullshit you. And you got to be nice because, sometimes they don't really understand they're trying to bullshit you. Or you don't want them to know they're bullshitting you. Well, that's what happened in this conversation I had with this cat. At some point, I just point out, I'm like, no, I think you're not getting. This is sophistry. You are trying to discuss a person. You are speaking to person B. You are person A. You're speaking to person B, discussing phenomena C. But neither of you are using the same word for phenomena C. And then he sort of got into this idea that there's some reason in creation that you have to move beyond concepts and language or something. By the end of this conversation, I don't even know what the fuck he was talking about. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, no, we have the Septivium. He wasn't familiar with this reference, which I had to admit. I'm like, okay, no, I wasn't familiar with the 7 arts and thing. But as soon as language, grammar, rhetoric, even I knew that. But this was something where I'm like, how? I'm referring to the 7 arts and sciences, and you're acting like you don't know what I'm talking about. You're really kind of skipping over this fact that we have words for this. Then I brought up something like, okay, in the world of sophistry is very normal now because of Marxist thinking. I'm like, you run into this a lot with Alex Jones, I said, where you have all these people who are the latest in the world of philosophy and politics that end up grouped around his fans. And he was like, I don't know who Adam Jones or Alex Jones. I think he said Adam Jones first. And I was like, well, Alex Jones is kind of like the top sort of news person of the day because MSNBC and CNN. And then I'm just sitting there and I'm like, Do you have any idea what's happening in the world around you outside of like what fiction you read or endless sophist conversations? And that's what hit me. The lush who loves Marx, the thirsty man, just thirsty as hell for female attention. Because this person's brain still works like a child's or a woman's. It fills full of oxytocin when they just go blah 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 blah. They love it. They're just so turned on by endlessly talking about food or a movie. You know, oh, I love this movie. I love this movie. I love this movie. You know, talking about groups that the lead singer insists on a falsetto that they can't actually properly maintain. You know, that all the stuff that effeminate minds are interested in. It's always vapid and basic. It must always be vapid and basic and fleeting. Because it can never reach to the realm of concepts. It can never... At one point, I even thought he was talking about harmonia. Like that he was like... That I'm like, oh, I think you're trying to talk about harmonia. That suddenly the entire septivium, or the entire sort of orderliness of the universe, is really visited in that moment. But no, that was the beauty of it. Of course, for a moment, I'm like, harmonia, and then it's like, but you see, if you were... turn this whole fucking thing on its head and pour it all over the table. I mean, blah 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 blah, and I'm just like, what the fuck is this guy even talking about? I keep trying to pull it back to some kind of terms, some kind of allegory, something that can be worked with or around. Now there is a thing in our society right now we're discussing that trouble in the world of philosophy. That one of the things that brought up, how do you, and this was actually made sense. If you make an example in physics and base it on certain concepts, and there's this part of my mind like principles or natural laws, and then it's like, how do you make them understand social justice, when you're discussing social justice, da, 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 da. And the one that he brought up, so it was that he had brought it up, and I was like, yeah, social justice is crap. And so he was trying to, how do you make somebody understand by like an allegory in physics or something like that? But then I was like, oh, so you mean make an allegory or something. And it just never, we can never get to some point where anything he was saying could be applied or made any fucking sense outside of his own head. And he's like, I do my best thinking when I'm not using language. And that was just one of these ding. No, that's inspiration. You have a visual inspiration rather than say something like auditory, in some auditory way, language. That this isn't that abnormal. A lot of people who are it's visual. It's, you might be more visual than kinesthetic. And that the auditory thing is its own issue. Using language. But that's one of the key problems is there's this part of my mind that hit me. I'm like, yes, this makes perfect sense in the world of without language, you are a genius. It's not until you start using words that you prove how fucking stupid you are. Well, yeah, like children. Children, and remember, there's a whole part of our culture that believes children have like some untapped, real knowledge, like true ability and knowledge and all this. And it's like, no, I'm sorry. They have the potential. Their brain has the potential to start establishing pattern recognition. It has this great potential for the way they recognize patterns to be set in an orderly or harmonious fashion. But until they have a grasp of language, and I even brought this one up, I was like, yes, like black children enter public schools with about 4 to 6 thousand original words, different original words in their vocabulary. White children enter with 20,000 or more in their daily vocabulary. This is what they're exposed to. The likelihood that white children will have books, and even hardback books, classics in the house, is extraordinarily higher than multi-generational Latinos and Black Americans. But then one could say the poor in general will collect fewer books than even the middle class. So this is, like a two person household. They're only, they're making, 40 to 80. That's middle. That's very, very middle. That's a hard life if you have more than one kid, especially. These are probably people who rent in America today. The working poor, you're getting, these are two people drawing, like 20 to 50K, 20 to 40K. These people are working at like gas stations and service places and stuff like that. This is working poor. These are usually two young people who have one child or more. The working poor that are like they've been working poor for decades. This is really that they probably come from a tradition of a lack of books and a lack of a large number of words in their initial pattern recognition of the world when they're young. If people could call it privilege, they could call it what they want. It's actually cultural. Lots of people, white and black, from the South have resented owning books and resented talk and write and why can't we be friends? Just because I don't speak right doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about. This is why can't we be friends? Why can't we be friends? So it's like, we could be friends. It's just that I'm going to say a bunch of words you never fucking understand. I'm going to talk about subjects your pattern recognition of the universe can't even begin to wrap itself around. There's a certain stage at which this is a lost cause. Why do people think the way they think? Why is this person thinking like that? At some point, something's broken. I literally, one of the key reasons I'm a Christian, and that every day, like I carry my little rosary with me all the time, wear my St. Benedict's cross, is because I am so fortunate that I had it pointed out. Your thinking has been broken. Somebody fractured your capacity to properly think. And that's why you have this horribly disharmonious thing going on in your psyche. And as soon as the more I started to, especially Stefan Molyneux Stefan Molyneux, Prax Girl, Mises, once I started and Rocking Mystery, Rocking Philosophy, I cannot give him. He's one of those people who it's like I should just start giving these people money. Really, is what it is. I'm not that poor. I could spare some change. That's one of the big things I try to make sure people know who I am into, so that you all can give them at least credibility, give them attention, get their work out, whether you agree with it or not, whether you agree with me or not. Look into them, see what they have to say, contest them. It's good to contest people. I tried to contest them, and I found no, they have made a simple argument. They have used pieces of evidence. They have taken the key opposing argument and have said, if I'm wrong, this key opposing argument should make sense. So let's walk through it. And over and over and over again, I'm like, I went through this process. Somebody's done this to me before. Oh, my father, because he was so fond of Plato's dialogues. He was so fond of philosophy. He loved walking through ideas. And why? That's our joke that we had together. The most important word in the language is why. I've actually come to Why and no. Those are, I debate. There's scales. I've realized there's scales. Why and no seem to be two things I found. No, no, no. These are priceless to use at the correct time. So this fellow and I had, it ended up where really what I realized, I'm like, at some point there was something that was like, because I like to do this and I'm like, oh, motherfucker, you're trying to get in people's heads. You do the sophistry thing. You try to get in their heads and you try to figure out their soft spots. Really, probably so you can endlessly talk about some shit, and because I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But as soon as he got to that point, some example he gave of, and it was just endless. I was like, what are you talking about? And finally, I'm like, oh, I get it. Okay, you go through sophistry until, in some way, shape, or form, you can kind of find some key element of, it's not agreement. It's not some place where we meet as humans. There was all this kind of bullshittery, this super liberal progressive left end bullshittery. And I was like, no. No, you do it because it pleases you. It's personally pleasing to find a point where you have resonance with somebody as a human. Usually it has to do with pain. That is why tolerance, in the old way it was used, not post-enlightenment, had meaning. Because it has to do with pain. It has to deal with having the patience to deal with pain. So I was starting to grow less and less tolerant of this man's argument. And that, in not just the old-fashioned way, but in the post-enlightenment way too. And I was just like, no, this is a bunch of sophistry. You're not really understanding that that's what's going on here. We're not anchoring any ideas to something that's in any way utilitarian or evident in a phenomenal way. This is and we're kind of talking about your feelings, which is a little weird that you're trying to broach it as something else. And then I'm like, or we're talking about that that you talk people's ears off until you can kind of get into their head, which was another moment where, there was something that I brought up in particular that I could tell something changed in the conversation. I was like, no, there's really this thinking that came with the Marxist school and then the thinkers along that line, that you could just subjectively redefine words. And it was really this thing of, well, that doesn't mean somebody's wrong when they say something. And I was like, well, no, I mean, like, say, when at some point you and I have to understand I'm referring to brown when I point at the wall that was colored brown. And he's like, well, because there's shades of brown. I'm like, yeah, now we're talking about shades of brown. It's like, well, but somebody might not agree that it's brown. And I'm just like, that doesn't matter. And I'm like, that's sophistry. You obviously have not understood this is an easily applicable allegory. That's the whole subject you were talking about minutes before. And I just realized, I was like, and then it was this get in your head kind of thing. Well, because conversations and conceptual patterns and I feels and I try to come away, then it was the compliment of, you make me think of da 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 da, does my conversation with you blah 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 blah. And I'm like, well, I guess I come away from it feeling kind of neutral, because it's true. When I listen to Stefan Molyneux, I've gone way out of my way to listen to a 40-minute speech by Stefan Molyneux, one of the most important philosophers in the last 50, 60 years, probably. Jordan Peterson. When it comes to economics, there's all these people who I'm like, no, I set time aside because this person actually applies principles to the real world and then points out, this set of principles from this philosophy are disproven by the evidence here, as I keep showing you episode after episode, so that we can finally get to the truth of things. or the dialectic. This was another thing. I'm like, I think you're talking about dialogue or dialectic, blah blah blah, because this was at some point I was realizing, I'm like, no, you're trying to pull this subjective truth thing. You're trying to, and also trying not to. Because as soon as you get to this, the truth is subjective, that anybody can just, oh, well, no, a tree is maybe a tree, it's maybe something else. And it's like, no, it's either you have a term to identify a phenomenal object, or you two haven't agreed on a term for it, which means you speak different languages. This is real easy. And I realized, I'm like, oh, no, this isn't easy, because you are engaging in sophistry. Something about getting to the truth of the matter is too psychologically hard. And so I was like, at a certain point, just like, no, I gotta go, just, and I could just tell it was like, I had totally triggered this guy. There's this one thing that happened to his face that I realized, no, I got you. I figured this out. And it's, it, I know it, but some part of you really knows that, no, he's figured it out. He's figured out that I just talk in circles. I'm thinking he's heard this from probably some women, women or men, that they're just like, no, you're just talking in fucking circles. You don't make sense. And it was hard. And this is because this wasn't necessarily an unpleasant person. This is a person who likes engaging. But I also realized, I was like, yes, you hate the West with its muscular men being capable. You hate that there, the capitalist thing. There's somebody who was bringing up that they were like, oh, I read Marx the other day. I love Marx. And I'm like, and you're a lush. You're a female lush who's unmarried, almost at the age of 30 or older. And that makes a lot of sense now. And it's one of those things that I've started to realize. One of the horrible things about libertarians, the new right, praxeologists, is, and this is something the compliment I'm giving to everybody who we've accepted our mortal state. This is the entire concept of original sin. Everything else anybody's ever going to fucking say, they're wrong. This is some crazy idea they got from maybe Saul of Tarsus, that or some goofy Protestant. No, the fact that you can die is the whole deal. We die. This means we live in a state of the flawed. That's the whole point. Is theology, the whole Christian, Judeo-Christian thing, everything from Greece, all of it, even Buddhism. This is an agreed upon concept of Buddhism. In fact, actually, I want to say it's the Naga Devas, but the generals, the 4 generals who guard the Dharma. Look it up. There's a story where they realize the Buddha preaches to them, and he preaches the Dharma, and he points out to them, if you exist, you will cease to exist. And in realizing this, they realized that they too truly were actually mortal. And it said, and their breath stank, and they felt pain. And it's because the body is actually rotting at all times and trying to replace itself from being burnt by the sun, rotted by all the things eating us, dissolving itself with its own juices. We're trying to constantly fight catabolism. So we're always trying to maintain an anabolic state where we're constantly creating more cells. This is the mortal state. Because we exist, we come into existence, we exist, and then we die. And I noticed one of the things in particular about the new right and libertarians and stuff, this is people who tend to be a bit more mystical. There's some places where this doesn't apply quite exactly. But Almost everybody. I've noticed there's a different way of thinking because you know you'll be dead one day. You know this is your chance. You're not in some I'll just navel gaze because I'll be running through this two or three more times or something. You're not mystically crazed. You really get like, no, I might this might be it. It's very likely it is. And even if it's not, I should take this opportunity now because I don't actually have a choice. This type of thinking, I have no choice because I'm actually immortal and there is no way out of this deal. And in fact, if I were to look at every other thing in nature, I've got the best deal of them all. Even the angels have no will of their own. They can make no choices. They are given missions, and they don't even have knowledge outside of the mission they've been given. This is not just a Jewish concept. This also moves into various Hellenic things as well. So there will be beings that have their realm of knowledge. That's where you get the secrets from the different spirits, right? Well, that spirit, that's what it does. It holds the secrets. And that's why usually the story of that spirit is that it somehow got a hold of them, something like that. And in discussing with this guy the idea of concepts, principles, philosophy, that I was really sitting there like, no, there will come a point where there will be people that they're permanently broken. They can never stop believing in the welfare state. Because it's feelings, and also they simply have no conception that anybody would look after the poor if there weren't supposedly somebody getting paid to do so by the government. That you could never pay anybody to be decent to another person if there weren't some kind of state regulation involved or something, so that nobody ever took care of anyone else who was weak until Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This is how warped their understanding of the history of the United States is. Completely and totally demented. And I've slowly realized also, I'm like, no, that's a big part of it. Their fundamental epistemology about the real world is so demented that they no longer, they could never really be reasoned with. They can't be reasoned with because they'll never accept, they can't imagine an America where Native Americans married into the white population. That just can't hit them. The Native Americans started farming and married into the population. They just can't imagine this. Unless it's Elvis Presley. Oh, Elvis Presley was part Cherokee. See, they know that. You can never tell them that thousands and thousands of Native Americans married in, they assimilated. No. No, they're all living on reservations. Somebody told me so. They were all given smallpox blankets, and the ones that lived are all on reservations. All of it's the same everywhere all the time. It's all the same, bro. All the blacks were slaves. They all lived in the South. None of them ever lived in the North until about the 1940s or 1930s. Whenever Grapes of Wrath happened. Whenever that book was written. This is, jazz. Yeah, I guess. Well, there must have been. Okay, I guess I don't really know if were there just a handful of black people who came out of the South to spread jazz? And it's like, no, there were black people living in the North in like the 1700s who were indentured servants who had worked their way out of indenture. Like, how don't you know? Oh, because you don't have that real phenomenal knowledge in the pattern of epistemology. So, history, you can't know history. I've started to really realize this, especially with people of socialist leaning. They know very little outside of their absolutely immediate surroundings. They actually don't, they aren't the kind of people who could think outside of their immediate surroundings. They have not yet been able to conceive of spans of time. I really think a big part of this has to do with they still have not dealt with certain emotional issues around their own death, their impermanence, their personal flaws. That personal flaws come with the human body. The idea of deficiencies, not just of character, but deficiencies of just the personage. I have a sensitivity to heat that I could never have been in the military because of my sensitivity to heat. Just the way it is. I would have never made it through boot camp. I would have been able to do all kinds of things, but it's the heat, and that's it. And also my vision's not is rather bad, rather poor. That's that. I had to accept that from early on, like in my earliest 20s, that I realized, like, oh, I really don't do well with heat. Okay, this is a good thing I didn't end up on fucking island, Paris Island or whatever. That the Marines train on. God, Mississippi, Jesus. Out in Hawaii or Arizona in the sun. Fuck that. But I'm glad somebody has that ability. I could appreciate that. That's their destiny. Those are the circumstances. There's words for all this shit. And I just was sitting there like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? This sophistry this guy was whirling through. And at some point, I just brought up something. I really realized, like, no, you have not accepted the idea of you resent Russians and you resent their point of view. A big part of it is because you can't deal with how real they are. You obviously have a certain resentment against conservative thought, libertarian thought, Missensian praxeology, or any of that kind of stuff. And objectivism, because at some point you have to deal with the fact that your time is limited and therefore valuable, and you have to you are naturally driven to come away with a profit from things, whether it's psychic or whether it's in some form, some kind of monetary thing. And that he was telling me his profit was coming from whipping through sophistry endlessly and talking about patterns of concepts that and feelings and such like. And as I start to watch, so let me make it more evident. Let me pull it into some. If you know you're going to die, don't you want to be healthy? Have you noticed how social justice warriors are like scrawny, unhealthy people, uneven featured people, like dumpy and lumpy, sighers? They sigh a lot. Social justice warriors are the kind of personality that sighs all the time. They're that type. There's a term for this. It's like not melancholy, not nostalgia, not politic, but it's along those terms. It's an actual term that comes out of the idea of the humors, and it's very accurate. The humors were an accurate system of description, but sighing that's a psychic oddity, showing that you're actually angry, frustrated, and you want your anxiety is getting to you. In a lot of cases, snorters. Ever notice braggarts snort? Just watch for it. Watch your favorite friend who likes, like, kind of, or bullshitters too. People who are into braggadocio and just rapping at you. They will snort. They'll flare their nose. Watch it. Watch for it. Especially when they're saying something kind of outlandish. I fucked all them hoes. Fucked all them hoes. That, and you'll realize, oh, I think you're exaggerating, bro. But um, wolf smiling. That's one that the Russians and Eastern Europeans really made me see. Wolf smiling. Jews made me see this too, because none of those people like that. They are very they whoa, you sure smile a lot. But it's also, are they smiling from their eyes, like the Dalai Lama smiles from his eyes. It's really quite pleasant. He has this real full smile. Now it's also, he's highly cognitively trained. He has had the pattern of his cognition like etched into his brain with tremendous force and rigor. There's stuff about the Himalayan Tibetan tradition of teaching that it's just, I mean, most people would be pretty amazed at. Like, look up the way they test people, the clapping test. That's an interesting one. You know, what are the three jewels? What are the da da da? What are the da da da? Tell me the blah 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 blah. Yeah, it's very interesting to see that, because you're trying, are they getting beaten up? And it's like, no, they're clapping. They're clapping at the person and demanding. It's a dharma battle. It's a way of equipping people for dharma battles. If you're aware of dharma battles, those are great too. Great to read dharma battles. Um, so that's it. Just, this was fresh on my mind. Why do people think like that? And it really has to do with the way that their emotions collide with the implication of knowledge about the phenomenal universe. That it was their mama a hoe? Was their daddy kind of a lame ass? Or was their dad sort of like kind of autistic, and that just simply wasn't engaged? I mean, there's people who it's like that's hard on them. No, that they had a parent who they have no idea. Like, no, really, think about it. Does that kind of describe them? Was your mother? Did she have a hyper feminine brain? Is she paranoid and a loony? Is she a paranoid Luna? You know, is she literally kind of constantly afraid of something, and you just simply have no idea why she's always nervous? Well, no, that's the thing. She's feeling hyper feelings. This is the other spectrum of the brain spectrum. At one time, they talked about that there was hyper masculine, that's the autistics, and then hyper feminine, that's the hysterics. Now, this model isn't used the same anymore, and it also gives a description that is quite evident in what we see around us. And especially for those who are anti-feminists, and especially when you look at feminists who are online, like Francesca Ramsey is obviously somebody who is barely going to keep her hysteria in check by the time she's old. When she's an old woman, she is going to be a vicious racist hysteric unless she fixes her brain. Or unless she's just, people stop giving her attention and she just sort of fades out of things and just pays attention to basic shit, like food and bad pop music and stuff like that. And stupid people's movies. Just some thoughts. Why do people think like that? Add anything you want in the comments. I've been having a hard time keeping up with all the comments. I try. I put a lot of the hearts you'll see. I even like when there's some pretty decent critique of what I've said. I have no problem with that, because a lot of you actually make me run through it. Like, oh yeah, maybe you should check that fucking feelings problem you're having with the knowledge of that what you said didn't make so much fucking sense, bro. So it's good some of you keep me on point about that. But this was really something. It's like 95 degrees here in Oregon, and that's why I'm shirtless Jackson again. I do own shirts. I swear to God, I totally own really nice shirts too. But I just wanted to put this out there because I was watching some stuff about the Democratic Socialist conference, and why are these people so misshapen and lumpy? Looking at Antifa, why are these people so bizarre and broken and lumpy and like broken people? Like just these weird, broken, like a lot of times, like manlets, a lot of manlets in Antifa. Like that's the one of the things that like keeps hitting me. I'm like, and then there's these guys who every once in a while I'm like, oh, he looks like a, wow, he's got some size on him, and sure enough, you get him from a few angles, and you're like, you have like back fat. Like what the fuck, dude? Like like you should be a big dude. But now that I'm getting a good look at you, you're about the height of a woman, and you're actually just a roundo, and um, which it's just, oh, okay, this is, yes, life is really hard for you. Life is probably really hard when your body puts on adiposity easily, and you would have to work out like a madman just to start getting the anabolic quality that you start changing, how your body metabolizes the adipose tissue and all that business. It would probably take a good year and a half of solid training to become like good and solid. No, I mean, like, look at Omar Isuf's channel, for you Antifa people who really, really, really are just sad looking. But oh my God, like some of these people in Portland, it's like, eat a steak, motherfuckers. Just snap out of it. But then I'm like, no, don't eat a steak. No, don't go to praxis. Don't look up praxeology. Don't look any of it up. We've obviously, something is horribly broken, and we will no longer be able to convince you. And this is what got them. I said, you have to crush them. When somebody simply will not deal with rationality or reason, there is no way of you suddenly like resonating with some conceptual field, or no. This isn't, oh, we connected at a human level to, no. What this is this person isn't being rational and reasonable. They're not using words the same way twice. They're whipping you through sophistry. No, you need to make this person understand their critical faults and failures that must obviously be leading them to not accept evidence. Like, this is obvious, and this is the thing with socialists, that a lot of these people, they're like, no, your family was so dysfunctional. You're such a degenerate in some way, like something so fucked up about your whole pattern that was established when you were young, that you no longer could conceive of people just interacting and totally voluntarily having interactions that both profit from. The win-win, the concept of win-win simply does, they don't think people do that. They do not think humans actually are into win-win situations. They think, no, everything is win-lose. The universe is win-lose. And that is a very important thing. I've been like, yeah, I was there. I get that. But it's also, I had my brain properly patterned in a good natural state, as the Thomas, the Thomas Aquinas, that he's like, no, people would be naturally kind of happy when they're glad, and sad when something is makes them sad, because that's the natural state of humans. That's their dignitas, the human naturally as they are. A lot of these postmodernists, people who can't get over postmodernism, people who can't deal with their emotions, name them, try to cognate why does that always come? Why do I snort when I'm always making up bullshit about fucking the hose? Why must I always laugh and make a wolf smile when somebody clues into the fact that I don't like put downs? That I don't like when somebody kind of checks me and humbles me. And I started to realize, I'm like, no, because if you were to have a real manly conversation about certain subjects, you don't like that. You've been programmed to not like doing it like a man, and that's my dad. That was my dad. Don't be a man about it. And at some point, I realized, I'm like, no, Dad, you've got to be a man. You've just got to be, because that's what you are. That's why he drank himself into an early grave. Worked his ass off, drank himself into an early grave. He fought his natural dignitas. Be natural. Accept the world as it is. Deal with like-minded in a way that you both profit. On it, just be honest. And slowly that spreads. Because good business is good business, and people who will do good business will deal with each other in that way. Bad business is bad business, and slowly but surely, we have to make those people more and more evident. And now that's kind of happening with CNN, MSNBC, now with YouTube and Alphabet, Twitter. All these people are being shown to be bad business people. That they simply don't actually deal with their customer base honestly. They don't want to. They're afraid of what people actually do when they're allowed to use the product. They don't respect the dignity of the users. Those are some thoughts I have for today. I'll just stop there. Take care.